Hello, welcome to Rants Not Over. Today I'm going to talk about narcissism. Narcissistic people can be anybody that you know. Sometimes you don't know that you are dealing with a narcissistic person. Once again, like I said in my last video, you do have where you can go on YouTube and you have doctors and licensed therapists and so on and forth that will talk about narcissistic people, and kind of give you some insight on what narcissism is. But as I will always say, I feel that the best person to get that advice from is from someone who has experienced it. I'm not saying, hey, throw the doctor's advice off to the side, throw the therapist's advice off to the side. Still listen to those therapists and the doctors, but know that if you really want like an insight on like inside of dealing with a person like that, is through someone who has experienced them, as well. Like, still take that into account. So, as I mentioned in my last video, I was in a marriage for 5 years, and that person was very narcissistic. But I also have family that way before I met this person that were pretty narcissistic, and a lot of times it's hard to identify them, especially when they're people that are your family and you're close to them, people that you really care about. It's hard to see how they're being narcissistic because sometimes they can come off like they're trying to be helpful to you and they're really not. They're being manipulative. And if you haven't learned like certain boundaries or different things, like myself, especially like I said, if it's coming from someone that's in your family, it can be a little more harder to identify than if it's, because they can be very manipulative, and you could lack in knowing certain things just because you were raised by a narcissistic person or you were raised around narcissistic people. Narcissism is one of those things that can be passed down, but that does not mean that just because you were raised by a narcissistic parent that you become narcissistic. However, it can affect you in other ways, and it usually does. If you're unaware, most of the time it's in ways that you don't even realize. If you're a person that always finds yourself apologizing, always apologizing every second, and then when you feel like something is off, you don't feel the need to speak up for yourself, you lack assertiveness, you most likely have been a part of some form of narcissism. If you feel that if you would speak up to a certain person about something that they would get upset, or you just feel like this person has done this and that, all these things for me, but then they do certain things and you feel like, okay, well, I'm not going to speak up because this person has done this and that for me, that is a sign that you're being manipulated by that person. Because regardless of if a person has done something to you, if something feels uncomfortable and something feels wrong, you should always feel comfortable enough to speak up about it. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up about it, there's something going on there that you probably don't even realize. So just some little things about narcissistic people. Number one, when they do wrong, some of them will acknowledge and they will apologize for the wrong that they've done. But when they're apologizing, they say things like, well, I did this because you did this or that, justifying their wrongdoing. And then you have some narcissists who will not acknowledge their wrong. They'll try to make it out that it's something you made up, that's known as gaslighting. So is trying to blame what they're doing on you. If they do acknowledge it and they try to blame it on you, that's gaslighting as well as not acknowledging it and trying to make it out that you're seeing things or you're crazy, whatever. So the best way to give examples for me is to explain some situations. So I'm going to explain a couple of situations. I'm not going to go too full on in some certain situations. So the first situation I'm going to explain is something that happened with a family member. So I was going to buy a vehicle from a family member. They were trying to sell it at the time, and um, the thing is, the person was pretty much was like, okay, there's these things that need to be fixed on the car. If you can fix this, you know, they wanted me to spend the money, come with them to spend the money to fix certain things on the vehicle. And I explained to that person that I wasn't going to spend money on a vehicle unless it could sit in the parking lot over here at my place. And this person was like, I don't know why you don't trust me, and you let past situations cause you not to trust me, and I'm not everybody else, and so on forth. However, yes, I have had past traumas, but when a person throws that you've had past traumas and that's the reason that you don't trust them, usually they are trying to manipulate you, sorry. And in this situation, I was like, okay, this person has broke my trust in the past. This person, just because they're my family member, doesn't give me the mental mind that I should trust them automatically, especially when it comes to you're spending money on a vehicle that's not even sitting in your parking lot. So she kind of got frustrated with me because I didn't want to spend the money, and I wasn't getting frustrated with her, but she was getting frustrated with me, claiming that the reason that I'm doing this is because of past situation. Now, mind you, I have put my trust in many people and in situations that I shouldn't have, because I had not quite learned like boundaries and different things like that, because I wasn't raised in a situation where I was taught these things, these boundaries that you should have. So there was times that I put my trust in people and that trust was broken. And once that trust was broken, yes, then I'm not going to trust. You can tell me certain things, but I'm not going to trust any and everything that you say. And I'm going to be very cautious of you after that, because you've broken that trust. And in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, but that is solely on what you did and not what someone else is, because plenty of people have broke my trust. And I still was dumb enough to trust people and somebody else, just not that same person. So, I didn't get into an argument with her about that. I was just like, okay, I'm not spending money on a vehicle, period, that's not in the same parking lot where I stay, and there's no documentation that says this is my vehicle. So later on, they decided they didn't want to sell the vehicle. They didn't have anything together either. Like, nothing was filled out, nothing was started on a process to get me the car. She just wanted me to spend the money on the vehicle, and then they decided they wanted to not sell it because all the money that they had spent on it. At the time, I'm like, okay, they have like 3 vehicles, so if you're gonna sell a vehicle based on how much you spend on it, just charge that person. When you sell it, you can charge that person that amount, because it's not a vehicle that, you know what I mean? So I don't know. The thing is that you try to get me to spend money on it, and I didn't. Now imagine if I had, it would have been the same situation. It wouldn't have been no different, because I've had this person do other things enough that, like I said, I cannot trust the situation. Now, the narcissistic part that I'm going to point out in this whole situation is where she tried to say, okay, because of what other people have done to me, I didn't trust her. But, sometimes, these narcissists, they don't, when the ones that don't acknowledge their like wrongdoing, whether it's in the past, present, they don't acknowledge that they've ever done anything that has caused you to have trust issues with them. They found ways to make what happened in the past not their fault, or like I said, you're just crazy and whatnot. So I'm like, when they decided not to sell, I was just glad that I didn't make the decision to spend that money, because that would have been a disaster, and that person would not have given me that money back. They would have found other ways to claim that I owed them money, even though I didn't owe them any money. Like I said, experienced already. But if you've done something for someone, or if they've done something for you. Say that you've done something for someone and then they do something for you. It's like a, don't feel like because you've done something for someone, especially if you offered, that something is owed back to you. That is kind of like, if you offered it, narcissistic. Not that a person is narcissistic because of that. It's different when your intention, it depends on your intentions in the situation. But when someone does something for you, they don't owe you anything. And if you do something, if someone does something for you, they don't owe it to you. If you do something for someone and you offer to do it, you are not owed something. Same thing is if they offer to do something for you, you do not owe them anything. It's different if you say, hey, can I do this? Can I borrow this? Then that's a different type of situation. You tell someone, I'm gonna give it back to you. You need to keep your word in those situations. Don't say, hey, I need this right now and I can give it back to you then, and then not do what you're doing. You're asking this person for this. Somebody asks you for something and they say, I'm gonna return it, and they don't return it back. Do not, under any circumstances, if they don't give it back to you, if they don't do what they said, if they don't keep their word, that is enough reason not to trust to deal with that situation again. So a lot of times I feel like it's better just to do your best to do everything you can on your own. And if you can't do it on your own, there's always different ways to get help from somebody that can be more trustworthy. Maybe you have a local shelter or whatnot. And I'm not saying, because this is not just about the vehicle, this is not just about that. Everybody needs help from time to time, but you do have to be careful who you get help from, because some people will use that against you in some form of way or take advantage of that situation. And so I always felt like it's better just to get things on your own the best that you can. And if you can't, go to like a local church, or they have plenty of nonprofits in certain areas. And that depends on where you are living and staying. But just do your best to try to have what you can on your own. And don't, if you sit in your mind and say like, I can't do this on my own, or when a situation seems impossible, it's only impossible to you if you keep telling yourself that it's impossible, instead of when you think positive. You will be surprised of the doors that'll open for you. I know a lot of people have heard about manifestation. Well, if you know you're a good person, you know your intentions are good, and this is something that you need at the time, something that's going to help you progress, all you have to do is believe that it's going to come to you. Yes, you have to do what you have to do, your part to getting there. But once you have done what you can do, if you feel that you're at a point where, okay, now I've done everything that I can do, now you have to believe that it's going to come to you. Now you have to believe that it's going to happen. Everything don't come exactly when you think it's going to come to you. And when it does, it's going to be wonderful. And I am the type of person that people say it's optimistic. You're being optimistic or thinking in a fantasy world. But when I say that, there are so many times that I didn't think that I would have something, or I was put in an impossible, to me, what was impossible situation. I had to wait on somebody else or wait on something, and I needed something right then and there. I needed something to progress. There's times that I didn't know if I was going to have food for my kids. There was just different things that I was going through. And, when I was like, look, a couple of times I did stress and worry about it, but I was like, okay, what can I do if I got to go to a food bank, if I got to do this, just do your best to do what you have to do before you go to another person, a family, whether it's a family member or a friend. Do what you can, do your best to figure it out another route where you're not going to an individual person, not just because that person can try and take advantage of that situation, but a lot of times, sometimes an individual person is incapable of helping you in that sense. Even if it looks like they can help you or they're in a position to help you, sometimes, you don't really truly know someone's situation from the outside looking in, and they can't really help you. Or like I said, you're dealing with people who will take advantage of you, or later on they'll do some crazy stuff and cause you issues. But in the times that, like, man, I'm thinking about the food bank, some other things came through, like money, or mysterious ways. People don't believe in God. I do, because of situations that have, when I couldn't do anything and things came through. So anyway, I'm gonna get to the second situation. And because my marriage, it was like 5 years, there's a lot that can be talked about that I can't just talk about in this one video. So this situation, I'm gonna do this one situation because I feel like this would go on a part of like being able to identify what you have done in a situation. Because a lot of times when you're in a narcissistic relationship, whether that be family or like intimate relationship, sometimes that person has tore you down so much that you do feel like you're the bad guy, like you're doing everything wrong, you can do nothing right. And they have you convinced that you're the bad guy and that you're the one that needs to fix things, when in all reality, half the time you don't need to fix anything. So I'm going to explain the situation and get to the point. And pointing out like the narcissism. Okay, so in the beginning, I was the only one paying all the bills. Like, he wasn't helping with lights, none of that. I was the head of household. I was paying the rent, lights, internet, whatever there was that was there. And I never treated him less than or anything like that just because I paid the bills. So he would do things like, come in from work and be upset with someone else and start an argument, and then, that was most of his things. But it was like always something I was doing wrong. Anyway, so at one point I was like, okay. He had thrown in my face about funds and stuff like that, and that's something I tried not to do. Talk about money, and I'm like, well, dude, you can't throw in that you did this, and that, when you're talking about the small things, the little things that you've done, when the bills are getting paid and you're just living under a roof and you're not paying for anything. So at one point I was like, okay, we talked about it. He decided he was going to pay the light bill. He's paying the light bill. We get into an argument because I can't even remember. He got upset at so many things. So he gets mad about something, starts an argument, and we have the townhome that we were staying in. There's the upstairs bedroom, for whatever reason, it stayed hotter than the rest of the house. And I guess because they say heat elevates or whatnot. So at the top, very hot. And when we get to these arguments, it would be my daughter and my son. We'd be upstairs just to keep a distance from him, because he was just, that type of person that you just needed to get space from. So we're, it's hot. I cut on the air, and he goes and he cuts it off. I go back downstairs, cut on the air. He goes and cuts it off. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go back and forth upstairs. I can see that no matter what, how many times I cut the air on, he's going to cut it off. So it's hot up there. There's kids up there. Forget me. If the kids were not up there, I would have dealt with it. But there's children that are also in the room that have to deal with that heat too. So, in the middle, I'm like, hey, why are you cutting off the air? He was like, I pay the bill. Now, mind you, he had just started paying the bills for about 4 years in the marriage. He hadn't paid for anything. And we get in arguments, and I would never cut the air off on him. I would never do certain things like prevent him from using things just because there was an argument. And mind you, I didn't start arguments. I did get back into him. I was the type of person that believed in, like, you're not going to talk to me any kind of way. I'm going to defend myself. So I would argue back with him, but I didn't believe in starting arguments, because for what? Like, when you love somebody, you don't want to be in an argument with them. You want to talk to them. You want to conversate with them. That is normal, to want to conversate. To start argument right off the bat, that's not functional in any relationship. So anyway, my point in that story is to point out that when it comes to narcissism, you'll deal with situations where you didn't do nothing to this person. You have to recognize what you have not done to that person. You have to recognize how good you've been to that person, if you truly have been good to that person, and just process the good that you have done and the things that you haven't done, but that you have experienced from this person. And for me, that was one of the situations, is I know when I was paying the bills that I didn't feel the need to have him sitting in a hot room, or have him sitting in a hot room because I'm paying the bills, or being funny and acting funny because I pay the bills. But that's what narcissists do. Regardless of how you treat them, how good you are to them, no matter how they treat you, you cannot expect them to do the same for you. They will go above and beyond to make you miserable when there's an argument or when they're not getting their way, and they will do things to you like that. And if you don't recognize those things, then you won't know that you're in a narcissistic situation or relationship. I also want to say, because a lot of times when we're in narcissistic relationships, we go to family and they'll tell us that, we should have done this and we should have done that. And they don't give the best advice because they don't truly understand it. You can't go to a family member that has never really dealt with a narcissist, about a narcissist, because they don't ever have the best views. Or sometimes you get that, well, you're the one who's staying there, and clearly you like it because you're staying there. So I'm gonna first and foremost tell you, if you are in a narcissistic situation, don't let anyone beat you up for staying when they don't really understand why you stay. And on another video, I will discuss some of the reasons that we end up stuck and staying in these narcissistic relationships that nobody can really understand but the person that's in it. And even sometimes when you're in it, when you're deep in it, you don't realize these certain things. But I'm gonna point out some things that help with that situation. And if you are a family member that knows someone that's in an abusive relationship, please don't judge them. It's something that you really don't understand. And the next video that I come with will explain some things to help you better get into the mind of a person that's going through a relationship with an abusive person, and why they stay, and tips on how you can, either, if you're the person in the relationship, tips on how you can get out, and then if you're a family member, tips on how you can support this person while they're going through this situation. This person doesn't need to be judged. They may come to talk to you about the same situation over and over, and they, having these tips that I will give in the next video will really help that person. And once again, I'm speaking from my own experience. I was in it for 5 years, and I kept asking myself, like, why am I here? Why am I here? Like, why? What is it that's making it so hard for me to leave? And one thing you can look up is a trauma bond. Like I said, in my next video, I will go into it further. But in the meantime, if you want to catch the next video, please don't forget to subscribe. And if you like this video, please like. And if you have someone that you feel like this will help, please feel free to share. And thank you so much.